Finally, we have some news, and this is definitely a pretty interesting topic. I'm sure everybody knows by now, and as you could tell by the tweet that I flashed at the start of the video, TSN's Rick Dollywall tweeted that Matt Zakaris was apparently told that the Canucks are exploring the possibility of trading away Brock Boeser. And before anyone says this is fake news, these are two pretty trusted sources, and it's not like it's coming from some Twitter or Instagram account called Real NHL Trade Rumors. I mean, they're not just pulling this out of thin air. When reading this tweet, my initial reaction was just why, and I'm sure that was a lot of other people's reaction as well, and one of the things that I read that did actually make sense is the possibility of Vancouver using Brock Boeser as a deal sweetener to unload some bad contracts that they have. Of course, the Louis Eriksson deal being the worst, Brandon Sutter, and also Antoine Roussel, all on some pretty bad contracts. Obviously, all three of those guys would be pretty hard to move, and it would be pretty hard to convince a team to take on any of those contracts, but it would be a lot easier if the team was also getting a 23-year-old sniper like Brock Boeser. Or maybe they just want to improve on other aspects of the team, say the blue line for instance, and Brock Boeser is definitely somebody who has a lot of trade value. He's still young, he scored 25 or more in a season twice, would have scored 20 again this season had it not been for the stoppage. I think he's a player who can be a consistent 30 goal scorer. He's fantastic. In this video, we're going to watch some Brock Boeser college highlights, we're going to talk about 5 teams that I think could potentially target him, and then at the end we're going to take a look at some of your guys' mock trades. Real quick, I'll give an honorable mention to the Edmonton Oilers. Whenever there is a very talented winger in either free agency or on the trading block, Edmonton is always a team thrown in the conversation because they have that appeal of potentially pairing that winger with Connor McDavid. If the Canucks ultimately do trade Brock Boeser, I don't see them trading him to a Pacific Division rival, and I'm not really sure what Edmonton would have that could intrigue Vancouver. They don't really have a lot of cap space either, so for those reasons, they're just an honorable mention. First up, we have the Colorado Avalanche. One thing I forgot to say is this is in no particular order. Colorado is another team kind of like Edmonton where if there's a big name player on the trading block, they're usually in the conversation, and when it comes to Colorado, that is because they have a lot of cap space and they have a lot of assets to trade as well. Over the past year, Colorado has done a lot to improve the depth on their team, bringing in guys like Valeri Nichushkin, Nemestikov, Jonas Donskoy, Nazem Kadri, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, but I think they're still missing that winger in the top 6 to really give them some firepower behind that top line of McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog, and you never know, Brock Boeser could be that guy. If there were to be a trade between the two teams, I don't see Colorado taking on the Louis Eriksson contract because while they do have a lot of cap space, eventually they are going to have to sign McKinnon to a new contract, which is going to cost a lot, and Makar is going to need a new contract eventually as well, which again is going to cost them a lot. However, I could see Colorado taking on a contract like Brandon Sutter's, who is signed through next season at $4.375 million per. That is something I think they could make work, and his contract would be expired by the time Colorado has to re-sign any of their top guys. But what could Colorado send to Vancouver in a trade involving Brock Boeser? Well, like I said, they have a lot of assets. Somebody like Tyson Jost intrigues me, and I've been saying over the past year that he could definitely use a change of scenery. Obviously, they're going to need a lot more than just Tyson Jost. I can almost guarantee you that there would have to be a defenseman going back the other way as well, and it's not going to be Cale Makar. Cale Makar is an untouchable and will most likely be an untouchable for his entire career in Colorado. Prospect Bowen Byram, probably an untouchable as well, honestly, but a defenseman that intrigues me that I could see going back the other way is Samuel Gerard, who has continued to get better every single season and is locked up for the foreseeable future. And at $5 million per season, even if he just continues to play like he did this year, that is reasonable, but he's only 22 years old and I don't see any reason why he won't just continue to get better every season. So if the Canucks do ultimately want to trade Brock Boeser, I think Colorado is definitely a team that could give Vancouver what they want. And could you imagine Brock Boeser being added to a young core that already includes Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, and Bowen Byram soon? I mean, that would be pretty insane. The Minnesota Wild are another team that intrigues me as well. One of the reasons why is because Brock Boeser is from Minnesota, and it would be a cool story, but that isn't the only reason, of course, why I have them in this video. I think they have a blue liner who maybe could intrigue Vancouver if there was to be a trade made between the two teams. That player is Matthew Dumba, who has found himself in trade rumors a good amount over the past year. Dumba is now 25 years old, and he's a great player, but the last 2 seasons haven't been great for him. He didn't really play very well this season, and last season he put up up great numbers with 22 points in 32 games, but missed the majority of the season due to injury. But if Dumba can regain his form from the 2017-18 season, then I think he'd definitely be a player that Vancouver would love to have. I don't really see Minnesota as a team that could take on one of Vancouver's bad contracts, however, because they have a couple bad contracts of their own to worry about in Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. The Wild do also have a couple young forwards that they could throw in the deal: Luke Cunnin, Jordan Greenway, and Joel Eriksson-Ek, who is another player that I think might benefit from a change of scenery. I would say Colorado is more likely to trade for Brock Boeser than Minnesota, but I still thought they'd be an interesting team to talk about. The Buffalo Sabres. I pretty much have them on here because they have to get Jack Eichel some more help and could use help pretty much anywhere on the entire roster. Now, Buffalo doesn't really have a lot of cap space at all, but they do have a couple of expiring contracts this summer in Michael Frolik and Jimmy Vesey that should free up a decent amount of space, but they do also have to sign Sam Reinhart to a new contract, and they still have bad contracts on the team like Jeff Skinner and Kyle Okposo, so that does put them in a pretty difficult position. In terms of what a trade could look like if they were to go out and pursue Brock Boeser, Rasmus Ristolainen is a name you'll hear a lot, but personally, I don't think he would intrigue Vancouver much. He's not a great all-around defenseman. He puts up solid offensive numbers, but other than that, he's, kind of below average in his own end for sure, and I think Vancouver would benefit a lot more from a two-way defenseman as opposed to a pure offensive defenseman. Brandon Montour is somebody that kind of intrigues me. He is an RFA at the end of the season, and I think he would be a good addition to Vancouver's blue line. In terms of forwards that they could send back to Vancouver, though, there really isn't much there or much to choose from at all, and for that reason, I think it isn't extremely likely that Buffalo could be a team to work out a deal with Vancouver, but I feel like they still should pursue him because Buffalo is a team that should be getting better. They really just haven't, and they need to do something to improve their roster, and if a guy like Boeser becomes available, I think they should at least pick up the phone. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, and this here is a team that I definitely think could work out a really even trade with Vancouver. They have the cap space to potentially take on a bad contract from the Canucks, but even if they didn't want to do that, they still have good assets where I think they could potentially give Vancouver what they wanted. Damon Severson is a player that had his name in trade talks not too long ago, and the Vancouver Canucks were one of the teams tied to him and potentially interested. I think he would definitely be a piece going back to Vancouver if there were to be a trade between these two teams. And like I said a couple of times in the video, there would most likely have to be a forward going back to Vancouver just to kind of replace Brock Boeser in the lineup. Somebody who I think would be a good candidate for that is Jesper Bratt. So Devils fans, what would you think of a trade? Brock Boeser to the Devils, Damon Severson, and Jesper Bratt to the Vancouver Canucks. I'm interested to hear what both fan bases would think about that. The Montreal Canadiens, the final of the 5 teams I wanted to talk about in this video. They're another team that always find themselves in the rumors if a big name player becomes available. Marc Bergevin is always trying to improve the team, and he is an aggressive GM. We saw that in the summer when he threw an offer sheet at Sebastian Aho. And they do have assets that they could trade. They have forwards like Thomas Tatar, Jonathan Drouin, Max Domi, Yoel Armia even. But like I said, Vancouver would most likely be interested in a defenseman, and Montreal doesn't necessarily have a lot to go around in that position per se. Jeff Petry is a name that would probably be most intriguing, but he is 32 years old, and does he necessarily fit the timeline for Vancouver? Probably not. Other than that, they don't really have any defensemen that I think Vancouver would be too interested in, besides maybe a prospect like Alex Romanov, but Montreal's not going to trade him. They have Noah Juleson, but again, Vancouver's probably looking for a guy to come in and improve the team now, and honestly at this point, Noah Juleson kind of looks like a project, and Vancouver already has their own project in Olli Juolevi. Montreal is probably not as likely to acquire Brock Boeser if he is to be traded as some of the other teams we talked about in the video, but I still thought they were definitely a team worth mentioning. But now let's get to the fun part of the video where we take a look at some of your guys' mock trades. The first mock trade comes from Ian, who says Nashville receives Brock Boeser, Vancouver receives Victor Arvidsson, a 2022 via New Jersey, and Nashville's 2021 first-round pick. Frees up about $2 million for Vancouver, and Nashville has the cap space to take on Boeser's current contract. While I think this is a relatively fair trade, again, I feel like there almost has to be a defenseman going back to Vancouver, and especially if they're trading with a team like Nashville who has a plethora of really good defensemen, I would almost guarantee you that one of them are going to be going back to Vancouver for Boeser. I just really can't see any reason why Vancouver would want to explore trading Boeser if it weren't to improve their blue line or unload a bad contract, but that's just me. Next up, this one comes from 2x4, who says to the Islanders Brock Boeser, and to Vancouver Kiefer Bellows, Anthony Beauvillier, Beauvillier and a second round pick. Now the Islanders were actually a team I was close to putting in this video. I could see them pursuing Boeser if he is on the trade market, and I think he'd be a nice addition to their team. I like the construction of the trade, but I would probably replace Kiefer Bellows with either Adam Pelech or Ryan Pulock, whoever the Islanders are more willing to trade. That would then probably make this trade more appealing for Vancouver. While Bellows is a good prospect, he is still a prospect, and Vancouver is a team that are in the playoffs right now, and I think they would much rather have someone come in right away and really improve the blue line like a Pelech or Pulock than have a guy like Kiefer Bellows, who you're most likely going to have to wait like 2 to 3 more years till he really hits his stride. Moving on now, this mock trade comes from Mr. Donkey, love the name by the way, and they say Blue Jackets get Boeser and the Canucks get Murray, 2 first-round picks and 1 second-round pick. Now, I like this trade. Columbus is a team that, like the Islanders I almost put in the video, I think they could benefit from getting a young sniper like Brock Boeser, and Ryan Murray I think could use a change of scenery, and I think he can be a good top 4 defenseman if he stays healthy. It's just a matter of him staying healthy. The risky part about this trade to me is the 2 first-round picks. I don't think Columbus would do that because, in my opinion, there's no guarantee they make the playoffs next year or the year after. They're kind of like a bubble team for me. I don't really know what direction they're going to be headed in after this season, so I don't see them trading their first round picks, but other than that, I really do like the idea of this trade. Next up from Dylan Bradford, Brock Boeser for no one. Trading him would be worse than Hall for Larson.
Okay.
Now the final mock trade of the video, this one comes from Victory with Maxime. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, but they say the Wild get Brock Boeser and the Canucks get Jonas Brodin and a second round pick. So this is kind of similar to what we were talking about in the video. Minnesota was one of the teams that I touched on. I had suggested Matt Dumba, and this person suggests Jonas Brodin, who is also a really good defenseman, but I don't think Brodin and a second round pick is enough value for Brock Boeser, in my opinion at least. I feel like they would have to throw in one of Joel Eriksson-Ek, Luke Cunnin, or Jordan Greenway, but a trade structured like this between these two teams is something that I could potentially see happening. That is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. If I had to guess, I would honestly say Brock Boeser is probably not going to get traded. Just because they're looking at trading him or potentially exploring the idea of trading him doesn't mean they're going to. And yeah, if I had to guess, I don't think they will, but it's still a fun discussion. I thought it would make for a good video, so make sure to let me know down in the comment section below any mock trades that you have for Brock Boeser, or what team do you think he could go to if the Canucks do ultimately trade him. With that being said, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to go down there and drop a like on it. That's the best way to show your support. And as always, if you guys are new to the channel and you want to see more NHL content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.